All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
It is the oopsies. There I am. Hi, everybody. It is the Mark Thompson Show. I'm here with Tony. I'm Kim McAllister. Mark is off. He's hanging with his mama in Washington, D.C. And here we are on the Mark Thompson Show. And what a show it will be today. We have not one, Tony, but two Pulitzer Prize winning journalists and authors. We've got Michael Hiltzik with the LA Times coming through. Of course, David Cay Johnston on a Tuesday will come through as well. So there's a lot to talk about. As a matter of fact, we've got some big news as far as Pete Hegseth goes. Boy, is it kind of been a bad week for him, you could say. So we have some video to play about that. Also, a conversation that Mark left for me where he spoke with Sean Bothwell, who is the director of the California Coastal Keepers Alliance, talking about plans to keep our marine waters safe, especially when they're under threat as environmental rules and regulations are lifted. So we'll do that toward the end of the second hour as well. But I'm happy to be here and thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Aloha. I see everyone in the chat already hanging out. Yeah, so thank you for being here. Let's start with Pete Hegseth because, Tony, this isn't going well for him. I have to tell you. He kind of had a bit of a meltdown at the Easter egg roll. It's one of these kind of angry tirades where I think thou doth protest too much. He lashes out at the press, and it turns out that maybe it's one of these flailing arm things where you're pointing blame at everyone else when really you realize you've had some issues and you've done something wrong. Let's see how it went at the Easter egg roll at the White House.
What do you want to say, sir, about the signal chat controversy?
You know, what a big surprise that a bunch of a few leakers get fired and suddenly a bunch of hit pieces come out from the same media that peddled the Russia hoax. Won't give back their Pulitzers. They got Pulitzers for a bunch of lies. Pulitzers for a bunch of lies and on hoaxes time and time and time again. And as they peddle those lies, no one ever calls them on it. See, this is what the media does. They take anonymous sources from disgruntled former employees and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Not going to work with me because we're changing the Defense Department, putting the Pentagon back in the hands of warfighters, and anonymous smears from disgruntled former employees on old news doesn't matter. So I'm happy to be here at the Easter egg roll with my dad and my kids because, you know, this is what we're doing it for. These kids right here. This is why we're fighting the fake news media. This is why we're fighting slash and burn Democrats. This is why we're fighting hoaxsters. This group, this group right here, full of hoaxsters that peddle anonymous sources from leakers with axes to grind, and then you put it all together as if it's some news story. And when we know exactly what it is. So I'm really proud of what we're doing for the president, fighting hard across the board, and I'm going to go roll some Easter eggs with my kids. Thank you very much.
So it's clear that Mr. Hegseth is agitated. He's upset with the media. Why is he upset? It turns out the media has learned that Mr. Hegseth received the communications. Remember, he reposted onto a Signal chat secure communications about the time, the placement, the dropping of bombs on Houthi rebels in Yemen. He did not only do that with folks on one chat, which included a reporter on accident, but he also did it to a second chat, including his wife, his brother, his personal attorney, etc. And now we are learning that apparently it was a copy paste from secure communications. So he made the choice to go from secure communications at the Pentagon to throwing it out to multiple people on an unsecure line. MSNBC has more on that.
What we have now learned is that, in fact, the information that was provided by Secretary Hegseth in that signal chat was provided directly from the commander of U.S. Central Command, General Eric Kurilla. And in fact, he sent that information on a classified system to Secretary Hegseth. And Anna, what we learned, according to these officials who we spoke with, was, in fact, Secretary Hegseth forwarded on that information on his personal phone on an unclassified signal app, a messaging app that many people use, frankly, but again, unclassified. Literally within minutes of getting that information, he sent that on the Signal app, not only to the Signal chat that National Security Advisor Mike Waltz had started, but also on one that the Secretary himself had started that, as we have now learned, included his wife, his brother, his personal attorney, and a number of his top aides. Again, the information was provided to Secretary Hegseth on a classified server, and he passed some of it on word for word on the Signal app, Anna.
Gabe, we just heard Hegseth.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. So the plot thickens now because his mistakes are rising to the surface. Hours after the freak out at the White House at the Easter egg roll, we would learn via reporters to multiple news outlets, including NPR and Politico, that apparently the White House is now shopping around for Pete Hegseth's replacement, that he is on the way out. Granted, NPR is quoting an anonymous source with knowledge of this. NPR citing an anonymous source, a U.S. official who said the process began after it was revealed that Hegseth used his personal smartphone to share classified information on this recent airstrike in Yemen. So, if NPR is to be believed, and Politico, who had multiple sources say it's not looking good for Pete Hegseth right now, he's on the way out. And so now it makes sense why he would be so agitated. He knows that he's got one foot out the door. The White House isn't ready to say yet that they're bidding adieu to Pete Hegseth. And so Karoline Leavitt is also saying, this is fake news. The media is wrong. We'll see. We'll see if the media is wrong. It's something, this whole thing, that could end up being the subject of an investigation, because we also know now that Senator Adam Schiff is asking the National Archives to investigate the Trump administration's group chats like this. So this could snowball into not just a job loss, but a national investigation that I don't know if there could be even more consequences. So Senator Schiff is asking the National Archives and Records Administration to investigate the Trump administration for using self-deleting third-party messaging apps to conduct government business. He thinks that would be in violation of records preservation laws, that it shouldn't be allowed, that these chats on Signal that then never become part of the National Archives, you can't see the communication, who said what, because it would all have been deleted, that goes against the laws of record preservation in the United States. So this thing is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and you can see why Hegseth is having a full-on meltdown on the front lawn of the White House at the Easter egg roll. Yikes. This gets bad for him. At this point, the official word is he's not losing his job, but there are multiple sources peddling underneath it all that say he's a goner. So that's it. Over the weekend in San Francisco, Al Gore spoke at a Climate Week event. Of course, I think today is Earth Day. I think that's right. Right, Tony? I think today's Earth Day.
Let me check.
You're checking. I think it is. If I got it right, I think it is. But Al Gore was speaking at a climate change event, and he did not hold back. This is the kind of thing that I think Democrats have been waiting to hear. And while Al Gore may not be active in front and center politics anymore, that is it? Yeah, Tuesday,
Yeah.
April 22nd, Earth Day, right. Yeah, so it's fitting that we should play this bit of this chunk of Al Gore's speech. Let's listen, Tony.
Our Constitution, written by our founders, is intended to protect us against a threat identical to Donald Trump, someone who seeks power at all costs to get more power.
Yeah, that's right. And that's what I think people have been wanting to hear. Let's hear Al Gore talk about that, because it doesn't seem like anyone else is speaking with the fire and the passion. We heard from Cory Booker during his filibuster, but thank goodness, Al Gore had a lot of other things to say as well. So if you can search that speech up, it might be worth your time. But that was Al Gore in San Francisco this week. I think it was Monday in San Francisco. He was speaking at the end of a week of climate conferences in San Francisco. So let's see. What do you think? Should we do a little bit of news here, Tony? Let's do some news.
Sure. I'm ready.
Yeah. Okay. Let's have at it.
Yeah, the liner. Give me a second. 1 second.
Okay. I surprised you with news. I'm so sorry.
Dang it. Give me 1 second. Let me get it ready.
Well, the thing is, I always, mean to get news in, and then like Mark, I kind of never get to it.
We gotta go sideways like always, right?
Exactly. So let's get it done, right?
All right. Here we go.
Pope Francis is lying in state at the Vatican following his death yesterday. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is the news on the Mark Thompson Show, sponsored by Coachella Valley Coffee. The public viewing begins tomorrow at St. Peter's Basilica. There, the faithful can pay their respects to the late Pope, who died at the age of 88. The Vatican announcing that Francis's funeral will be held Saturday before he's then taken to the Basilica of St. Mary Major for entombment. That is what's going on. They have a ceremony underway now at the Vatican, and they have a live feed so people around the world can watch.
Yeah, I think it just ended, it looks like, because they were showing a service earlier.
Yeah. The stocks on the way up today after we saw them plummet yesterday. This after the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed almost 1,000 points lower yesterday. Today's jump happened after Bloomberg reported sources said Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told a group of investors that a trade war with China is unsustainable. The Dow has been up over 1,000 points at times, so we continue the roller coaster ride that is the markets. The White House says President Trump stands behind Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. This comes after an NPR report said the White House was in the process of looking for a new leader at the Pentagon. Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt saying the Hegseth is doing a tremendous job and he's bringing monumental change to the Pentagon. We'll see how that works out for them. Harvard University filing a lawsuit against the Trump administration now. They're trying to block the government from freezing the school's funding. The federal funding to the school, I should say. The lawsuit, which was filed in a U.S. district court in Massachusetts, is looking to block the administration from withholding funding for what it calls leverage to gain control of academic decision-making at Harvard. Earlier Monday, the Wall Street Journal reported that the Trump administration is planning to pull an additional $1 billion in funding from Harvard University. So this is fixing to be a fight they're going to take to the courtroom. Speaking of the courtroom, the Supreme Court is hearing arguments today over whether parents can keep their elementary school kids out of classes that use books that have LGBTQ characters or themes. Today's arguments involved a group of Maryland parents who sued the school district after it eliminated the opt-out portion. Often parents can opt out of having their kids involved in these lessons. A lot of parents claim their right to exempt their kids based on religious beliefs was being violated. The school claims the program led to a higher rate of absenteeism. They took the opt-out option off the table. In California, a couple of stories as well. 2 lawsuits filed in Los Angeles claim major home insurance companies colluded to limit coverage in California neighborhoods for that are at risk for wildfires. Insurers are accused in these lawsuits of forcing homeowners onto the state's ultra pricey last resort insurance program, and so now it goes to court again. Filed in Los Angeles, 2 separate lawsuits saying that these major home insurance companies colluded to limit coverage in high fire zones in California. Former Fox News host Steve Hilton is running for governor of California. He is an immigrant. He grew up in London. He eventually moved to California, became a U.S. citizen. Hilton told Fox News he sees the election for governor of California as a life or death moment to fix what he called democratic rule in California. So he now throws his hat into the governor's race. In other news, and I do have other news for you today. I know I do. Pardon me, as my screen switches over. The president, Trump, is expected to attend the funeral of Pope Francis. The president making the announcement on Truth Social. He said the White House is confirming that the president will travel to Rome Friday and return to the United States Saturday after the funeral, and it will mark Trump's first foreign trip of his second term. Trump said he and the First Lady are looking forward to being there. The funeral starts very early in the morning, our time, Eastern time, 4 a.m. Eastern, so he will be leaving right after that. And on tariffs, the White House says it has more than a dozen trade proposals on paper that have been brought by other countries. Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt telling the reporters President Trump says the U.S. is doing very well in respect to a potential trade deal with China. She noted trade officials will meet with almost 36 countries this week to discuss possible trade deals. Leavitt saying the administration is moving at Trump speed to ensure the details and the deals get done on behalf of the American people. This comes as Trump set a July deadline earlier this month for when these reciprocal trade tariffs will go into effect. So apparently the White House is happy with the speed at which this is all happening. Elsewhere, there are hundreds of City of Los Angeles employees that could be out of a job under the mayor's budget proposal. During her State of the City address yesterday, Mayor Karen Bass said the city could lay off 1,600 employees to help deal with a nearly $1 billion budget deficit in the upcoming fiscal year. She called the city employees the greatest asset during her address, says the decision to implement layoffs comes as a decision of absolute last resort. The layoffs are not expected to impact the LAPD or the Los Angeles City Fire Department. In Oakland, the mayor-elect, Barbara Lee, is laying out her vision for the city. Lee holding her first press conference since defeating Lauren Taylor in the special election to become Oakland's next mayor. The former congresswoman says she's going to do the hard work and make the tough decisions to represent all of Oakland. Mayor Lee says she has a 10-point plan that she would like to implement during her first 100 days in office, and that includes improving public safety, reducing red tape at City Hall, and getting the Alameda District Attorney's Office to crack down on illegal dumping around the city of Oakland. Ranchers in Northern California are facing challenges with increasing wolf populations, which have returned to the area over the last decade. Modoc and Sierra counties have declared emergencies due to economic losses from wolf attacks on cattle. There's also rising concerns for pets and children. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife approving a hazing strategy employing non-lethal methods like shooting from the air and using trucks and drones to scare wolves away. Ranchers, though, still skeptical. They say past efforts like electric fences with flags have proven ineffective. But the wolves are an endangered species, and state laws regarding self-defense against wolves add to the challenge for residents and ranchers and law enforcement as well. There is, in Brentwood, California, in the East Bay, east of San Francisco, a high school football ref in trouble after being arrested in a sting operation targeting online sex predators in the Brentwood area. Police say 48-year-old Tommy Vance allegedly arranged to meet up with what he thought was a minor. He was arrested by detectives during a week-long sting. Police say a search of his home turned up 15 illegal firearms, so he now faces multiple charges. The authorities continue to investigate a deadly shooting in Van Nuys. The Los Angeles Police Department officials identifying a victim in a weekend shooting. They say this man was standing by his vehicle outside of a donut shop when he was approached by a couple of men who ultimately fired shots at him, and he died at the scene. What led up to the shooting is not known, but what we do know is that police are investigating that in Van Nuys. The data and identity security company Junio is launching its AI-driven biometric identity verification platform. It's called Cross Transaction Risk. Traditional ID verification validates a user's identity at a single moment in time. The platform offers ongoing intelligence and real time. So it'll be interesting to see how that does. Uber is being sued by the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC alleging Uber is charging customers for an Uber One subscription without their consent. The suit also claims Uber did not deliver promised savings and makes it difficult for users to actually cancel that subscription once they get involved in it. Uber is denying the allegations, but it looks like the FTC is having none of that. And Instagram is using artificial intelligence to root out kids who are lying about their age to skirt safeguards online. TechCrunch is reporting that when parent company Meta suspects a falsified account, it will roll the user to a teen account, even if the birthday suggests that the user is an adult. In some cases, the company does make a mistake. It's giving people the option to change their settings. So Uber cracking down on people trying to get around the rules. So, and lastly, let's talk for a moment about my story just popped away. I was going to talk about Duolingo chess. Here it is. Duolingo is bringing the game of chess to its learning app. The world's most popular learning app will contain lessons offering puzzles, mini matches, and other learning strategies as well. A spokesperson says its goal is to increase access to those who are novel to chess or new. An English iOS version will be released in May. I don't know about you, Tony, but the Duolingo is big at my house. There's Duo.
What is it?
It's a language learning app. So for free, or you can pay for higher levels of service. You can learn how to speak languages on this app, and apparently now you can learn how to play chess on this app as well.
That's what it looks like. Huh.
Yeah, kind of good. There you go.
That's how disconnected I am.
Yeah, it's time for you to learn a new language. Why not?
I should have a long time ago. I was stubborn.
There it is. And this report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. The best coffee, Mark says, has ever passed his lips. I'll tell you, the best tea as well. It's all organic. Yes, it's from women-owned farms. The product is amazing. The people are really lovely and nice. You can check the website, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. They have tasting notes, tell you exactly what you're going to buy before you put it in your cart. And when you do get it in your online shopping cart, there's a little code box there that'll save you some money just for being an exclusive Mark Thompson Show listener. You can enter the code MARKT, no spaces, MARKT at checkout, and that'll get you 10% off at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. It's a happy day when the box full of coffee and tea arrives at this house, let me tell you. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is The Mark Thompson Show.
Show.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Hey, which one of you is Mark Thompson?
What he's got going here is a situation.
It's unbelievably offensive.
Put up your pants, my man. Pull up those pants.
Ralph Nader just sent me a book. Did he send you one too?
I offer this sincere apology to you today.
Everything is going extremely well.
Calling me a liar? Is that what you call me?
You, sir, are a liar.
You are a cover-up artist, and you are a liar.
Liar, liar, your pants are on fire!
Google told me.
Can you let him finish, sir?
It was wrong, it was stupid, and I'm trying to be a better person.
No, no, no.
I'm going to tell you what I think.
What are the porn stars doing here?
Do you have a secret talent?
Isn't anybody but a weed?
It's 100% effective. How about that?
Say what?
And this is their new host.
There is no defense for my conduct.
I misspoke. I stand corrected.
And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community, the Asian American community.
Time's up, mother effers.
It is the Mark Thompson Show. Mark is off today, but I'm so grateful that he let us have this great conversation that he recorded with Sean Bothwell, who is the executive director of the California Coastal Keepers Alliance. And so without further ado, Tony, let's take a listen.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This is Mark Thompson.
Feels good.
When they raided Mar-a-Lago, God didn't like that.
What's up, everybody? It is, I'm a tree hugger, so I really cherish once in a while a segment about stuff that I think we all should care about, like clean water, clean air, pure soil, this kind of thing. And this is a special shout out to California listeners and viewers. And remember, California may be the canary in the coal mine. This is happening elsewhere. In a move that could leave millions of Californians more vulnerable to water pollution and flooding, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, designed to protect the environment. That's the P in EPA. They've announced plans to revise the definition of waters of the United States, WOTUS. The new rule is expected to scale back further the protections provided by the Clean Water Act following the U.S. Supreme Court major EPA decision. Now, if that seems at all complicated, it is a bit, but the bottom line is kind of scary. And with us to explore the bottom line is the perfect guest. Sean Bothwell is the executive director of the California Coastkeeper Alliance. They're leading efforts to protect California's inland and coastal waters since 2018. Sean has focused on issues like desalination, stormwater, trash policy, recycled water, all of this while leading the agency's legislative advocacy in Sacramento. In other words, it's not just protests, it's not just screaming, it's not just tweets, it's actual legislative agenda. How about it for Sean Bothwell, everyone? Hi, Sean.
Hey, Mark, how's it going today?
This sounds alarming to me. And I remember the first Trump administration and that first Trump EPA, if you want to think of it that way, that faced a problem with clean air. And they said, no problem. It was about particulate matter and certain pollutants and poisons that were going into the air, and industry having trouble not exceeding the federal thresholds, what would be allowed in terms of those poisons going into the air. And the EPA and Trump administration, this is the first one, said, no problem. We'll just raise the amount that you can put into the air and all will be fine. Same thing a bit, as I recall, in the first Trump administration with the water. So when you talk about changing various aspects of what's allowed in water, I think back to what is a familiar agenda, as I recall, on the part of the right. Tell us what's going on now.
Yeah, so the definition of what a water of the United States is has been in debate and been fought over for decades. And it really is crucial to the Clean Water Act because it dictates whether you need a Clean Water Act permit or not, whether you are regulated in what you discharge to a water body or not. And so if it's not a water of the United States, that means the Clean Water Act does not protect that waterway. And so this has always been a target for the right to weaken over the years. And we saw it with the Supreme Court case 2 years ago. And now the Trump administration, as you mentioned, is making a rule out of that Supreme Court decision. And so it's essentially the Trump administration's interpretation of that Supreme Court case. So it's only going to get worse. The Supreme Court case was bad enough as it is. We estimate in just California, about 600,000 miles of streams are going to lose Clean Water Act protections. And anywhere from 50 to 93% of our wetlands just in California are going to lose protections just from the Sackett decision, the Supreme Court decision. And
so does that really, Sean, does that mean when you say they lose protections, that means literally there can be dumping, there can be any number of things that might have been, associated with fines and imprisonment and all these other things. Now that can go completely unregulated.
Certainly for the nation, there's a lot of other states that don't have any type of backstop state program. California, we are lucky. We do have a state permitting program, but that permitting program has far less stringent requirements, is pretty cumbersome and almost impossible to enforce. And so you see permittees trying to move to these state permits all the time because they're vague. It's not clear when you're in compliance, when you're not. And so they can hide from that and hide from accountability.
So what is the plan then to deal with this kind of thing? It's an aggressive plan on the part of the administration and the EPA. I mean, the EPA, it's an odd thing, now seems sort of more committed to rolling back these protections in the environment than anything else. Well, what is your plan?
So our plan, our first step is a bill, Senate Bill 601 by Senator Allen down in Los Angeles. And the bill essentially takes Clean Water Act tools and puts them into our state law so that we can treat those waterways that are losing protections. We will treat them just as if they're still under the Clean Water Act here in California. And we're also changing the enforcement standards so that they're standardized between Clean Water Act permits and state permits, so that really what we're trying to prevent is permit shopping. If the standards are the same for a state permit and the enforcement's the same for a state permit, then there's no incentive for folks to even ask to move from a Clean Water Act permit to a state permit. And so that's one of the big things we're trying to achieve, while also just maintaining the environmental standards that we've enjoyed in California for the last 50 years.
I would think, Sean, that in California anyway, you have that kind of legislative support to something like this. Like, this shouldn't be a heavy lift for you.
You would think so. There's a lot of things going on in California.
What does that mean? Industry? Who's pushing back?
Well, politically, the opposition largely is coming from agriculture, but the chambers of commerce are also largely opposed. And honestly, to my frustration, some of the folks with Clean Water Act permits that this bill, quite frankly, doesn't impact at all unless they want lesser permits, they're also opposed. And what I hear from opposition is, it's really big, it's a big bill, it's complicated, and it's about water. So we're just going to oppose it because we don't understand it. And so we're trying to educate opposition of really what we're trying to do is maintain the status quo while the rest of the nation goes backwards. That's our ultimate goal with this bill.
I mean, California, again, does have history in doing just that, right, Sean? I mean, that California can lead the way, tougher environmental regulations, tougher protections for things like water and air here in California than you'll find elsewhere in the nation. And in that sense, we've always, at least I have, seen California in sort of a leadership position when it comes to the environment. But now we seem to be, under real attack. And you're making it sound like it could maybe not be the cakewalk in Sacramento where the bill would have to pass that I might think it would be.
No, it's definitely not. I would say just about every regulated entity is either opposed or concerned about it. There's a lot of folks out there that, quite frankly, want the Trump rollbacks. They want lesser standards, and they won't say it out loud, but that's the reason they're opposing it. Well,
when you say a lot of folks out there who want that, you mean these constituencies associated with the agriculture and industry?
So agriculture, if we write the bill correctly, which we're working with agriculture to do, this bill shouldn't even encroach on agriculture because agriculture wasn't part of the Clean Water Act. They've been exempt from it. They're not considered what's called a point source, so they're not part of the Clean Water Act. It's the folks that have Clean Water Act permits that are really the ones that see this as a way to lessen their standards. We have something called a 303D list, but essentially it's all of the very polluted waterways in California, and it lists all the sick waterways, and it provides limits on how much you can pollute in order for the waterway to get healthy again. And I think they see that as, they like to see that get rolled back. They like to see those waterways no longer be protected by the Clean Water Act.
So tell us what's at stake here. Remind me what's at stake.
Yeah, so if you can imagine, so the Supreme Court rule essentially said that the waterway needs to be continuously flowing. And you can imagine there's a lot of waterways here in California that don't flow continuously, relatively permanently all year long. There's a lot of seasonal streams. I mean, there's major rivers that sometimes don't have water in them for parts of the year. And that doesn't mean that if someone were to discharge trash or bacteria or, toxic metals, that stuff's eventually going to get to the coast and where we swim. It's going to get into our drinking water and make it more expensive to treat drinking water. It's, going to lead to more polluted fish and marine life. All this stuff ultimately ends up, flowing downhill to the coast where we swim, where we fish, where a lot of major cities are. And so that's the impact, that these waterways are not going to have the same accountability under the Clean Water Act that they used to have.
So the pollutants and the wave of pollution makes its way, it starts in the wetlands or starts in one area, and it makes its way through all of these different spaces that you're talking about.
Certainly. Eventually, let's just take the Santa Ana River. There's portions of it that don't flow all year long. But eventually it's going, if you dump a ton of trash in the Santa Ana River, sometime in the winter, it's going to fill up and that trash is going to make its way out to the ocean and we're going to end up swimming in it.
What can we do as voters and listeners and viewers to what we've just been talking about? What can we do to help keep these waterways cleaner?
I mean, the most important thing, this bill, Senate Bill 601, right now it's in the Senate. So certainly calling senators is the most helpful thing we can do right now. And it will be in the Assembly, hopefully, starting this summer. And the Assembly can be a little more moderate. So, it's an uphill battle. Letters to the governor are certainly helpful. This is a controversial bill. And hopefully Governor Newsom sees this as us taking a leadership role against the Trump rollbacks. But, there's a lot of political interests that don't like the bill. So calling state senators, assembly members are key right now.
It makes me smile that you say it's a controversial bill. The controversy, that's why I keep pressing you on exactly what constituencies are fighting back against you. Because it seems so basic to life in California that you'd want the cleanest possible water. This is where regulations, I'm always reminding people, they really mean protections for the environment, for consumers, et cetera, but particularly when the environment's concerned. And I understand we can overprotect or overregulate, but wow, I almost think you can't overregulate protections when it comes to water, air, and soil.
Yeah, again, we're just trying to maintain the status quo here in California. And that kind of pains me, to be perfectly honest. I would love to be out there, running legislation to, improve our protections. But at this point, with the rest of the nation going backwards, that's the best we can do. That's what we're hoping for. And so, yeah, it is frustrating. There are some folks out there that, are working with us to try to make sure that the language is very precise. Because it's water in California and everyone fights over water, and so it can be controversial regardless of us just simply trying to maintain the status quo.
So again, it's Assembly Bill 601. Is that what you said?
It's Senate Bill 601. Yeah, by
Senate Bill 601. And just so people don't make the same mistake I just made, we'll actually have it in the description for those who are listening and want to make that call. And what is the timetable on votes and on this legislation?
So right now the bill is going to Senate Judiciary. Senator Umberg from Orange County is the chair. So anyone from Orange County, call his local district would be incredibly helpful right now. We're somewhat optimistic though that we're going to be okay in that committee, but it would help. It's been a tough committee in the past, and then it'll go to the Senate floor probably towards the end of May. So yeah, calling senators by the end of May is incredibly helpful. And then from June to August, It'll be in the assembly, and then it'll hopefully, if everything goes right, we'll end up at the governor's desk sometime in September.
That's soon. I mean, the end of May is soon. So, gosh, Sean, I wish you the best with this. Stay in touch. Let us know what's happening. And to the degree that we can, energize our audience and be part of any good effort in this regard, it would really be, it would be our pleasure. And it's very important. So, again, thanks again for all the good work you do.
Thank you. Really appreciate the time.
Sean Bothwell, everybody.
It is the Mark Thompson Show. I'm Kim McAllister. So excited to welcome a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. He is an author. He has also won awards for his work on business and financial journalism. So who better to talk about the economy and what is happening with tariffs than Michael Hiltzik from the LA Times. Michael Hiltzik, everybody. Hi.
Hi, how are
Hi.
you? Good to be here.
I'm good, thank you. One of my favorite things when you pop on the show is your real reporter's office, but it looks like things are being cleaned up over there.
Well, actually, I just I'm using a laptop and it's facing the wrong way. But if
is that what's happening? Thank you.
You could look and see the mess behind me.
I mean, it's a real reporter's office. It brings me such joy. I've been reading your work in the LA Times. You wrote an article about the reasoning in Trump's mind, possibly, for why he's doing this back and forth, as Elizabeth Warren says, red light, green light, with now we have tariffs, now we don't. Now you see them, now you don't. And you talk about the possible reasons, like why did he do it? The stock market was freaking out. That could be a reason why he stopped the tariffs and did this. You say maybe it was the bond market was freaking out. Maybe he really is a mastermind. Maybe there is something to this whole stock manipulation thing. The bottom line is we don't know, and I don't know if even he knows. Michael Hiltzik.
Well, I don't think anybody really does know, because on the surface, and in fact, even if you drill down, the tariffs at whatever stage we're talking make absolutely no economic sense. They make no sense as trade policy. They clearly won't do what the White House claims they will do. And I suppose any of us can try to delve into what's going through Donald Trump's mind, although I would say that's a dangerous place to be for our own mental health. So, but there's been no rationale that's been offered by the White House that makes sense to economists or trade experts at all. Even if you want to do what he claims he wants to do, which is to bring manufacturing back to the United States, the way he has done it, the way these tariffs have been structured, will do nothing but further erode manufacturing in the United States. I mean, he's basically taking aim at some of America's strongest manufacturing companies. I wrote about Boeing just the other day, which is a column that I think you saw, in which I pointed out that he thought he was basically taking aim at China, but he hit Boeing between the eyes, because China is one of their biggest potential customer. They had scores of planes on order and already shipped to China, and China basically is suspending those deliveries, and it said that its domestic airlines cannot order from Boeing without specific permission from the Chinese regime. Well, that's not good for Boeing, and it gives a big step up to Boeing's main global rival, which is Airbus, the European company.
There's an opinion piece in the New York Times by James Crabtree that says Trump's tariffs will pay off for China. He says that picking trade fights with countries across the Asia Pacific plays right into China's hands for increasing its influence over the region, which we have seen them willingly say, oh, that's what you want to do? Let us go on a tour of these Asian countries so that we can start building a coalition of support against America.
Yeah, a lot of reports that we get from domestic companies as well as foreign companies is that during, after Trump's first term or during his first term, when he started this trade war with China, a lot of companies sort of changed their delivery chains to favor places like Vietnam and other Southeast Asian countries that were sort of immune from Trump's tariffs. Well, now he's gone out, and in this current crop, he's raised tariffs on goods that are coming from places like Vietnam. So all these domestic companies that thought they had actually solved the supply chain questions that Trump had basically imposed on them 4 or 5 years ago, well, now they're stuck because the supply chain that they set up in response to Trump now is being threatened by Trump. So it makes it's so senseless that I can't even begin to describe the confusion and the appalled reaction by real economists, not these clowns that are basically giving Trump advice.
Since we're on the topic of China, Mark sent me this video from this woman he calls a Chinese economics ninja. Her name is Zongyuan Zoe Liu, and she says, listen, you can't force China to the table the way Trump is trying to do. And to your point, this really all kind of plays right into their hands. So I'd love to get your opinion on what she has to say. Here's a little bit of it.
And ask you, if I could, Zoe, what is the view from Beijing, would you say, about the possibility of a kind of deal on economic technology, maybe other issues as well? Do you sense, based on your reading of what people are writing in China and the context you have, that there is optimism in China about the possibility of a deal? Or do you think that there's pessimism, or do they simply want to delay the negotiation as long as possible because maybe no news is good news? How do you think that they look at this question?
Thank you, Rush, for the question. If I were putting myself in the shoes of Beijing and Chinese policymakers, I would say that reaching a deal, whether it is a grand bargain or a small deal, reaching a deal is something nice to have, but it is not a must. And the reason is because, China has accumulated a lot of experience to deal with escalating trade tensions and potentially escalating of geopolitical risk. Accumulate a lot of experience. And for trade tension tariffs, this round is not a surprise for Beijing. And the second reason why I don't think Beijing is very eager or desperate wanting a deal is also because over the past decade, China has reduced its vulnerability against Western economic coercion, including building an alternative renminbi-based financial system. So from that perspective, indeed, I would say if I were Beijing and if I look at the Chinese economy through the indicators that Chinese leaders care the most, meaning technology, closing the R&D gap and things like that, the economy probably is not doing terrible. So from that perspective, I don't think Beijing is desperate for a deal.
So that's a little bit of what she has to say. And it seems like maybe this might not be as easy as Trump thinks it will be to make a deal with China. They might not be so motivated to come to the table.
Yeah, well, I would add something to what she said, and that is that it's certainly clear to trade experts that China is in the catbird seat here. It's really got an advantage over the U.S. in any sort of trade relationship, because what China has that the U.S. needs is manufacturing capability and also raw materials that the United States can't provide for itself. These include, metals that we need for electronics. It includes goods that we simply don't have the capacity to manufacture on these shores. And what China gets from the United States is essentially money when we buy these things from China. But China has a lot of money. It's got a very large surplus of of consumer savings, which it can call on if it needs. China is really not economically threatened by any cutoff of trade with the United States, certainly not to the extent that the U.S. is threatened by a cutoff of trade from China. So this is basically, it's insane, for anybody, Trump or otherwise, to think that these tactics and this sort of trade war can be won by the United States. It won't happen.
Meanwhile, with all of this, we have investors apparently backing away from the United States. And I was reading an article on CNBC saying that more Americans are opening accounts and moving money to Swiss banks, getting away from the dollar, trying to save their money, trying to prevent losses in the markets. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure that that's a major trend. And certainly, I don't think it's a trend among retail investors. That is, those of us who buy stocks and bonds and mutual funds and what have you. What we are seeing is a decline in the value of treasury bonds, and that suggests that major holders of T-bonds and treasury securities overseas are basically lightening their portfolios of T-bonds. And what happens there is that the price of bonds declines and the interest rates that they carry rise, because basically you have to offer investors higher interest rate to keep selling them. And that's really not a good trend. And it's also a trend that traders and economists find very odd, because normally what you would see when the stock market is declining, as it has been doing, you would see bond prices rising because bonds become basically more advantageous than stocks. We are not seeing that. We're seeing both stocks and bond prices declining, and that suggests that America's position as an investment destination of last resort, of a flight to quality, is eroding under Trump.
Well, it also goes to this whole idea of stability. Reading this article about Swiss banks is that they have a more neutral politics, a more stable economy, a strong currency, all things that America has been known for, and all things that are now really in question in America. Do we really have stable politics? Is our currency stable? What's happening? It seems like the table's being flipped over.
Well, clearly we do not have a stable politics, and it's also clear that that the dollar is sliding in relation to other currencies. It's at a recent low in value. That's not good. You would expect the dollar to rise in value when there's international instability, as we've seen with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and other phenomena like that. So basically, this just underscores that Trump is injecting a chaotic mood into the investment markets and the global financial markets that it's not going to be to America's advantage.
You saw yesterday stocks drop, and today I'm looking at this as surge. So we closed 1,000 points lower almost yesterday, and today Bloomberg is reporting that the Treasury Secretary told a group of investors that a trade war with China is unsustainable. Yesterday, it was based on Trump's comments about the Fed Chair Jerome Powell. It's almost like he doesn't understand that when he opens his mouth, anything he says has an impact on the markets. Or maybe he does understand that, and I'm just silly.
Well, I think people like Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, are making it clear to him what the consequences are on the financial markets. Now, that being said, I would be a little wary about ascribing, any one-day move in the stock market to anything coming out of Washington. Basically, going back to February, the stock market was at an all-time high. It was cruising for a bruising. We would have expected prices to come back down, a reversion to the mean. And we are seeing that. And it's a little hard at this point to distinguish that sort of natural trend that, when you hit a height, you should expect to give some of that back. from the moment by moment reaction of investors to what Trump is saying. And I think what is happening and what may account for the increase in stock prices that we're seeing today is that investors are basically weary of worrying about what Trump has to say because he so seldom follows through. When he opens his yap and he says, he wants to fire, Jerome Powell as chairman of the Federal Reserve. Basically what people think is, it's not going to be so easy for him to do. And it's going to be clear the more he talks about it, that it's unwise. And it probably won't happen in the same sense that when he talks about imposing tariffs and lifting tariffs and imposing them again, people have stopped believing that he knows what he's doing or he will do what he says. And I think that's going to hurt him over time because the policy expressions that he articulates are simply not going to be believed as anything he's actually going to do. And he's not going to be happy with that. So, that's where we are today. That's where we were yesterday. That's where we'll be tomorrow.
I wonder when the voters who voted on the price of eggs, right, who voted on they wanted a better economy for themselves and their own personal pocketbook, when they look at all of this and when it affects how they feel about the current administration, whether anything can possibly get in Trump's way.
Well, what we've seen certainly is that the opinion polls about how the public feels about his economic management have just been plummeting. I think he's at the lowest ebb he's ever been on that topic. And I think that what people are seeing, they're hearing continuous reports of companies shutting down, of layoffs by the hundreds and by the thousands in key industries here. The idea that a government job, which used to be a pretty secure job if you were doing your job, are now threatened. We see communities that relied on government on a government employee are just collapsing because these people are getting fired for no reason at all, in the name of supposed efficiency, but agencies are being much more efficient.
Yeah.
And if we see something that really hits people where they live, like problems with Social Security checks not coming in the mail or not being deposited in bank accounts on the day they're supposed to, that's going to just be a cataclysmic reaction for Trump and for Republicans that I don't think they're prepared to sustain. But I think, that's a lot of why you're beginning to see even some Republicans sort of backing away from him and saying, we don't agree with what he's doing, and we'll do what we can to protect Social Security and Medicare and all this, because they're worried about, look, we see town hall after town hall that are hosted by Republican senators and members of Congress, just, the expression of unrelieved fury being directed at people that the constituents say, you should be out there fighting for us, and you're sitting back on your haunches. That's really not going to be good for Trump. And I don't think it's going to be good for the Republican Party.
You see, even in the chat, people concerned, Silicon Valley Block says he's going to cause a depression, and people are concerned about it, not spending money because of it.
Yeah, depression talk, recession talk really has a way of building on itself. And the more people read about the prospects of a recession sometime this year, maybe as early as the summer, they're going to pull in. They're going to stop spending. They're going to, try to protect their resources. And that's only going to exacerbate the economic problem.
I always love talking to you. Thank you so much, Michael Hiltzik with the LA Times. You're so nice to come in and chat, and you're so knowledgeable. I really appreciate your time today.
Happy to be
here. Thank you. Bye. Have a great rest of your day. Well, from one Pulitzer Prize winner to another, how great is this show when Mark Thompson isn't here? It's time for us to turn to our regular Tuesday guest. We are so lucky to have him swing by every week. He is an investigative journalist. He is a best-selling author. He is, of course, the recipient of a Pulitzer Prize. He is David Cay Johnston, everyone.
Hello, Kim.
Hi.
And it's always nice to file Michael, whose column is, I believe, is an LA Times subscriber online, the single best part of the LA Times.
Yeah, he's very, very good at what he does. And so are you. And there's a lot to talk about. Wow, what happened with Pete Hegseth? You know, he's, what is it? Copy paste. Let's just open as many Signal chats as we can and share it with everybody. And now he had a meltdown at the White House egg roll and basically was flailing around blaming the press for what seems to be his demise. We've got an anonymous source telling NPR that the White House is already shopping around for a Hegseth replacement. Meanwhile, the White House spokesperson is saying, not true, it's all fake news. What's going on, David Cay Johnston?
Well, what's fundamentally going on was that Pete Hegseth had no business ever being nominated, and especially no business being confirmed. The fact is he was a junior officer, and he has a behavior pattern ranging from sexual assault to out of control behavior when he's drinking that should make it evidently clear he had no business being there. Whether Donald stands with him or not, we'll see. I mean, Donald could well have a search underway, or the staff could have maybe Susie Wiles, the chief of staff, has a search underway to replace him. That doesn't mean it will happen. It should happen. It will be important for the Republic for that to happen. And there's also reporting in the New York Times and elsewhere that the Pentagon leadership is in disarray because Hegseth doesn't know what he's doing. And I think all of this is bringing to light that many of these senior positions in government require a great deal of management skill. Now, if you're weak on management skill, but you have good ideas, you can have a number 2 and 3 around you to back you up and support you. But if you then have the people you have supporting you, number 2 and number 3 in the agency, are equally incompetent, guess what? Then you got a mess on your hands. And I also found interesting, if I can, Kim, one of the point that Donald's smart aleck, childish, junior high response to a question from a reporter about Hegseth was ask the Houthis how they're doing. Well, so I went and looked up some of the Middle East news sources and Israeli sources I follow, and evidently our bombing of the Houthis, which has cost roughly $500 million at this point in the value of the munitions, because these aren't simple bombs, these are fancy bombs, apparently is having no impact of any significance on the Houthis, which shouldn't surprise anyone. After all, following the end of World War II, we did an extensive study of bombing in World War II. And in essence, what it said was bombing doesn't work. It does not achieve military goals. It may knock out this or that specific target you want to eliminate, a power plant, for example. But overall, bombing is not a successful strategy, and I would argue it's a cowardly strategy.
It would be nice if he knew the answer to the question before he asked it, so he didn't look so silly when it turns out the answer is the opposite of what he had hoped.
Yes, absolutely.
Something, I mean, I don't know, just a little ahead thinking there, forward thinking. President Trump is also blasting the Supreme Court, moving to immigration here. He says he's being stymied at every turn by the courts, saying that they cannot possibly hold trials for migrants that they plan to deport. They can't hold these trials or go to court over these gang members. He says, my team is doing fantastic, doing an incredible job, but they're being stymied at every turn by even the U.S. Supreme Court, for which I have such great respect, but which seemingly doesn't want me to send violent criminals and terrorists back to Venezuela or any other country for that matter. He says it's not possible to hold trials for these migrants that they're trying to deport. Well, if they'd held some type of due process or some type of hearing for the man that they sent with an administrative error, this could have all been avoided. Does he not see this?
No, he does not.
Oh,
And just before we came on the air, I was reading an article in the Miami Herald that just came out this afternoon about one of the people being held in El Salvador. His name is, I'll mispronounce the first name, I guess, Nivera Adrian Leon Rengel, 27, who's a barber, who applied to enter the U.S. to make an asylum claim, waited in Mexico, came on the appointed day, followed everything he's supposed to do. He's a barber. He is stopped by ICE on March 15th. They ask him to pull up his shirt to show his tattoos, and then they say, "You belong to that gang, the Venezuelan gang, not MS-13, the other one," and take him into custody. Turns out that his tattoos consist of his mother's name, his daughter's name, a lion, a tiger, and an icon for a barber shop. There is no regard here for the law. There's no regard for individuals, and there's no regard for facts or truth in what this administration is doing. And what the message Donald Trump wants to make sure we all get is, I will do any damn thing I want, and you will comply or else. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're Columbia University, which bent the knee in a despicable, indefensible surrender, or you're one of the law firms like, I want to say Paul Davis, that's a singer, that similarly bent the knee. And, we have a bunch of law firms that are giving away as much as $100 million of free legal services. That's an extortion racket that Donald Trump is running. We have a criminal in the White House, a convicted felon, a lifelong criminal, the third generation head of a 4-generation white-collar crime family. And we shouldn't be surprised that he's behaving like a crime boss, because that's who he is and who he has been for a half of a century at least. So what you're seeing here is going to get worse. And the only thing at the moment that will protect any of us is the Supreme Court. Courts that will slow things down, and then the Supreme Court. I am almost certain, Kim, that Chief Justice of the United States, John Glover Roberts Jr., is having second thoughts about the 2023 immunity decision that basically said anything a president does while in office that's an official act is unreviewable. Because we're seeing in Trump's behavior his belief that I have a get out of jail, do anything I want free card. I want to add one element to that. John Yoo, Y-O-O, who was a Justice Department lawyer in the George W. Bush administration, someone who found a way to excuse waterboarding, for which we executed Japanese officers after World War II who engaged in waterboarding. He is one of the principal authors of what's known as the unitary executive. And what we're seeing under Trump is that the unitary executive theory, that all executive functions come from the president. There are no independent agencies. There are no independent boards. There is no independent attorney general. This is a recipe for corruption, because the reason we have boards and we say, oh, on the Securities and Exchange Commission, there are 5 members. There must be 2 members from one party and 3 from the other, is so that we don't have corruption, so that we have internal checks and balances. All that's being wiped away.
Sure. And that's what the first thing they did: get rid of the whistleblowers, get rid of the overseers, get rid of everyone whose job it is to make sure that corruption doesn't take hold in government. But I think we all knew when that immigration, or that the ruling on presidential immunity came down from the Supreme Court, you could see the writing on the wall. They just unleashed a monster.
Yeah. And Joe Biden would never do this, but under that ruling, Joe Biden could have had Donald Trump just arrested and held incommunicado. He could have done all sorts of things. He didn't. Donald's not going to be constrained in that way.
Right.
And I would add, I guess, one more element to all of this, and that is, I think any reasonable reading of the 14th Amendment, which says you cannot hold federal office if you gave aid or comfort to an insurrection. makes Donald Trump ineligible to hold any office, because he sent the mob on January 6th, and he spent 3 hours and a few minutes after that doing nothing. In fact, saying to people, "Oh, come in and see this. It's beautiful. Look at this." And then years later, he says to us, this was a day of love. These were patriots. And he pardons these people. And now they're talking about giving money to these people as reparations. Again, we have a criminal in the White House. We live under a dictatorship, which I've discussed in previous episodes of the show. And all he's doing now is consolidating power. Do not give up, folks. This is not over, but the longer it goes on, the worse it's going to be and the harder it's going to be to fix this problem. We survived a civil war. We can get through this, but not if you just, say, "Oh, I don't want anything to do with it," or all you think you need to do is post that you're upset on B-Sky or Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's move to New York, because this story about this judge who is now temporarily blocking the mayor of New York City from allowing ICE agents in Rikers Island into the jail here. There's a lawsuit that accuses Mayor Adams of entering into a bargain with the Trump administration in exchange for the Justice Department dropping criminal charges against him. So is it true then that, or what they're alleging, is that Trump makes a deal with Adams to allow ICE to basically run into prisons to go into places they haven't previously been allowed, and in doing so will look the other way on corruption and on all the things you've allegedly been doing while in office in New York?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's even worse than that. What the Pam Bondi Justice Department wanted to do was to put in abeyance its prosecution of Adams that was begun under the Biden administration. For people who don't know, Eric Adams, who's a retired New York City police captain, took a lot of money from Turkish interests. A whole bunch of people around him have been indicted. There's very strong, overwhelming evidence of his corruption. I pay a lot of attention to this because we own a second place in New York City, where one of my children lives. So I have an interest in what happens in New York, particularly in Manhattan. They wanted to withdraw the prosecution, but without prejudice. And what that means in legal terms is they can file it again later. Well, that was essentially a lever on Adams. You will do as we say, you will carry out whatever policies we say, or we'll indict you again, or we'll resume the current indictment. So the judge, after appointing an independent lawyer to examine the facts, followed the lawyer's advice, which is he dismissed the case against Eric Adams with prejudice. That case cannot be brought again. Eric Adams, whatever else he is not stupid. He knows perfectly well that he is vulnerable on lots of matters of corruption. And he also knows if he doesn't play ball with Donald Trump, they'll find a different case to come after him with. So they have a lever over him, and allowing ICE agents to go into Rikers is something that this judge has reasonably put a stop to at the moment. And there's a legitimate issue here about should local police cooperate with ICE.
Right.
And we're seeing it play out in the other way. I mean, one of the first things I teach my law students is that every sword can be a shield, every shield can be a sword. So the Merit Systems Protection Board was created to protect whistleblowers. I've shown how in many ways it's been turned into a way to attack whistleblowers by the government. And in this matter, you're seeing how local law enforcement that used to work with the FBI in places where the FBI was useful to suppress things like civil rights, now we're seeing the opposite side of that coin. This is very troubling, and everywhere we have elected officials who are corrupt, like Eric Adams. If the Trump administration wants to, they have a powerful lever to say, do what we say, or you're going to prison.
Yep. And that seems to be what's happening here. And it's while encouraging that a judge is blocking the mayor and the deal with Trump over ICE at Rikers Island, it feels like more should be as you mentioned earlier, the whistleblowers and people that are overseeing. It feels like more should be done when something like this is so obvious that it's such a deal being made.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know exactly how, absent litigation, we're going to stop a lot of these things. And I'm no fan of litigation. Trust me, you never want to be in your life in any kind of litigation in any way whatsoever. But it appears at the moment that it is lawyers and principal judges, some of whom are appointed by Donald Trump, who are the only bastion of protection for the liberties of the people. Because Donald doesn't believe that you should have any liberties. I mean, he's been very clear. One of the ways he tells you that is when he says, you shouldn't be allowed to write things about me unless I approve of them.
Isn't that nice?
By the way, I don't know if you've seen Hegseth. I'm sorry, I didn't bring this up before. There's all these pictures of Hegseth with his tattoos on them, including what looks like a German Iron Cross.
Sure.
And I've been getting emails from people pointing out that it says in Leviticus that you're not supposed to have tattoos or cuttings on your body.
Oh.
And of course, Hegseth holds himself out as Donald does as a Christian, and they're part of what I call the pick and choose faux Christians.
Sure.
There we go. There's this picture. They only want to know about those parts of the Old Testament and the New that foster their interests. They just cherry pick and choose.
Since we're on the topic of immigration, and this I think goes to once you deport someone from the United States, you lose track of what happens to them next and the authority to make sure that they're treated in accordance with the way we treat people in the United States of America. Now there's a story about Venezuela accusing El Salvador of human trafficking because Bukele is offering to exchange 252 Venezuelan migrants deported to El Salvador for 252 prisoners in Venezuela. So could there be a prisoner swap that involves people that we, the United States, sent there?
Well, once you go back to the mentality of the slavery era, the modern world slavery era, not the ancient world, where those who are enslaved are no longer human beings, they're property. You can see all of this happening. And, for Donald Trump to assert that he has all these powers, he can take over Greenland because he says it's necessary. He can rename the Gulf of Mexico, et cetera, et cetera. And then to say, there's nothing I can do about these men who are in El Salvador. I don't know. You can pick up the phone and say, we're not going to pay you for any of them unless you give these guys back that we asked for. You could tell them that the United States Marines will be at the presidential palace in a matter of hours unless you turn it over to go to the other extreme. This is just absurd. Yeah. Donald is trying to establish that he is all powerful. And he's not. And we have plenty of Totos pulling at the curtain to expose the wizard.
Saw this story in ProPublica, which I thought was interesting because I hadn't seen this reporting anywhere else. But of course, as you mentioned, corruption, yet again, it's just this overrunning theme to this administration that these politically connected companies are benefiting from Trump tariff exemptions. There's secrecy, there's confusion, and no one knows why these companies are making the list. One of them makes resin. This is the plastic used to make bottles that were used for drinks and such. And it's unclear why this company was spared tariffs and why other companies maybe weren't. But this company is called Ray's Holdings, and it's among the largest privately held companies in the United States, owned by brothers who've donated millions to Republican causes. It's all about the money. And records show that they had hired a lobbying firm with close ties to the Trump White House to make the case on tariffs. So I guess if you go to the Trump administration hat in hand, money in hand, and say, how much is it going to cost us to get off the list of people affected by tariffs? That's the way it works.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, Donald is a guy who's transactional here. In everything he does, Donald is transactional, and he's brought in people who understand that. I mean, he can't do every deal and every arrangement out there, but he is surrounded by people whose loyalty is to Donald and who accept transactionality. And this applies even to Donald's personal life. I mean, Donald was married 3 times, right?
Mm-hmm.
His marriage to Marla Maples, Marla loved him, but the other 2 marriages, those were business arrangements. And if you can endure a transactional marriage, trust me, making a deal with somebody to exempt them from a tariff, that's a minor issue. It's just get it done. And how much do I get for it? How much money or a favor or something I need taken care of on the QT? Look at his relationship with Elon Musk. He's allowed Musk until very recently to overshadow him. He hasn't been critical of Musk with this limited recent exception. And the reasonable question to ask is, so what's the transaction with Musk we're not seeing? And the obvious one would be that Donald is on the hook for roughly $600 million in 2 civil suits, one state, one federal. At the end of the day, he will lose his appeals in these cases because his appeal grounds are virtually nil. And it may well be that while he has bonds from insurers basically to cover the judgments, that behind it somewhere is a promise from Elon Musk to take care of it or take care of some part of it, which would absolutely explain Donald's behavior. There are no doubt lots of deals being made about the tariffs where we're not seeing them. Now, some of them may not require any corrupt deal. Trump, I thought, from his personal power perspective, was very smart to exempt laptops, computers, and cell phones and the like from the China tariffs. But to think that most of these deals, and perhaps there, but I doubt that one, that there isn't some corrupt deal in the background, that's absurd. Of course there is. That's just who Donald is. And by the way, notice he hasn't yet filed his mandated financial disclosure statement. At least last time I looked 10 days ago, it still wasn't there. And I'm not surprised. So we don't really know anything about his finances.
There's a case that is before the Supreme Court. It is centering on this mother who was trying to opt out of LGBTQ material. She's got a 10-year-old child with Down syndrome, and she thought that maybe learning about LGBTQ issues would be confusing for her child. And it used to be that a parent could opt out of that. But the school system in this state, I believe, I want to say Maryland, this school system says it's too difficult for students to be opting out. It's too disruptive to the classroom. What are we going to do with the kids when they do opt out? Where do we put them? We don't have the staff to oversee the opt-out kids. The case is now before the Supreme Court.
Right.
And it centers on really who gets to choose the curriculum before our children. Is it the school district? Is it the parents? Is it legislative? Is it judicial? What's happening? And the case, I think, can answer a lot of questions. It's a bigger case than I think a lot of people realize.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kim. I think the decision here will turn out to be very, very important. We have a tradition in this country of states being in charge of education. Most state constitutions have a provision that's called first call, or its equivalent, that says the first duty and therefore the first call on the state's revenue is education. California is a first call state, for example. And I think it's a terrible mistake to have all these different school districts and school boards making fundamental decisions about education.
Mm-hmm.
And we are doing a terrible job in public education, not because the teachers are incompetent, but because we're not setting up the necessary standards for higher education. Children in other countries, small countries like Finland, large countries like Japan, are vastly outperforming American students. And this business of, I don't want my child to hear this. We've had parents say, I don't want my child to have to take a class that's going to talk about the Earth being more than 6,000 years old, things like that. We have a significant minority of children now who are being homeschooled.
Yep.
And well, I'm sure there are examples of children who are homeschooled who do much better than they would have in public school. In general, they're not getting the education that they need and that we need of our young people to create a stable, thoughtful, prosperous society. So it's astonishing the Supreme Court even has to hear a case like this. But this is an opportunity for the court majority, which includes, of course, both Thomas and Alito, who really don't have any support or care for liberties of the individual, to rewrite American education. And even if they end up in the minority and write dissents, this is going to turn out to be full of material that will foster more litigation and more efforts to destroy the public institution of education.
Yeah, agree. A story came out this morning about the media, and the producer of 60 Minutes, the top producer, is resigning, saying he's lost journalistic independence. He can no longer run the show the way that he's always run it. And this is just another case of another voice being silenced. So he's out.
Well, the reason you're seeing this at CBS, the reason you saw it at ABC, and I believe the reason you have seen both the owner of the LA Times, the billionaire doctor, cancer drug creator, and the billionaire owner of the Washington Post, Jeff Bezos, behave the way that they are, is because their primary economic interests are highly subject to being gone after by Donald Trump, by being punished if they don't fall into line. When the Gannett newspaper chain, which was over 600 newspapers, is now about 300 newspapers, it's run by a bunch of soulless private equity people who are simply in the business of dismantling all of this. And at the end of the day, private equity is always about the real estate. Trump being there doesn't have any real effect on that. USA Today, for whom I agreed to work as a columnist and then quit right away because they had all the spine of a jellyfish, has always been that way. Yeah. But 60 Minutes stood out since it began in, if I recall, 1967, as a really well-done show. I mean, they do a mix of things. They do light profiles of people and whatnot, but they've done lots of very important investigative work. You have to leave them alone to do that. My friend Walt Bogdanich quit 60 Minutes when they wouldn't air his story about how the nicotine in cigarettes was measured by the companies. They literally removed the nicotine from the tobacco and then put it back in so there was uniform nicotine in every cigarette. And he couldn't get that story on the air. That's why he works at the New York Times now. Yeah. This is not the first time there's been outside interference, but CBS, ABC, and NBC all have stations licensed over the airways. They're vulnerable to attack by Trump, and he's got the FCC working on making them bow down, making them come to heel. Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong at the LA Times, he needs FDA approval for his drugs. He needs cooperation from the CDC and other places. And Jeff Bezos needs his distribution network, his import materials in order for Amazon to prosper the way it has. And so Donald understands that all he has to do is signal, I'll just use the government's power to ruin you or hurt you. And I say this as someone who Donald has said to me many times, only once or twice that I can remember in person, but on the phone many times, because that's his style. I'm going to ruin you. I'm going to sue you, and your children will be homeless. I mean, that's the way the man thinks. And so all of these CEOs, they actually have a duty to their shareholders. I don't think their duty requires them to bow down to Donald and come to heel, but I can't say that it's an unreasonable thing for them to do if they have a publicly traded company to try and curry favor. And again, this is what happens when you have a criminal in the White House, when you have a felon. Maybe we should start calling him Felon 47 or Donald Trump, the convicted felon who's president of the United States. Now, you're not going to see that in the news because it would be called tendentious. And especially in the newsroom at the New York Times, there is no worse word to be said about your copy than it's tendentious.
Uh-oh. Well, that's a ding word here on the Mark Thompson Show, so we'll give you a ding for that.
Where's the noise? Bing!
That's right. I'm going to give you, because our time together is running out, I'm going to throw a bunch of stories at you all at once. There's your ding. And they are all stories that include cuts to federal workers and how it's affecting the rest of us. A story pops out this morning. The FDA is suspending milk quality control tests because of job cuts. We saw Trump lay off nearly all of the federal workers who investigate the deaths of firefighters. Okay, there's the Department of Interior now, which has lost a bunch of staff members. And so now it appears DOJ is taking control of our national parks. The release of federal workers who do the important work of keeping up our parks, of keeping our milk, our food safe. Milk, by the way, which, I mean, you being a father, you know, you have to have, I mean, there would be vegetarians that would argue differently, but pediatricians will tell you, you need to feed your baby milk. You need to do that.
And whole milk, not fat milk, because your developing child's brain needs the fat.
So I would argue that by not doing quality control tests on the milk in America, we're putting our children at risk. So putting kids at risk, firefighters at risk. These are people that investigate the deaths of firefighters who were just launching an investigation into chemicals and the firefighter rates of getting cancer and sickness and because of the chemicals they're exposed to. So it's about keeping Americans safe. But I guess saving money is more important than our health and our well-being.
So, Kim, I'm going to perhaps make some news here with an observation. This is going to be much worse. People are going to get sick. We're going to perhaps have unfortunate incidents with airplanes because of the cuts at the FAA, which runs the air traffic control system. We will definitely have foodborne illnesses, which are already very high in the United States compared to, say, Europe or Japan or South Korea or Australia, will be higher because of this administration. One of the other things they've done is they've cut significantly and removed important people who work in the national security field, in the intelligence community. There's a particular fellow, Navy admiral, who was known for his extraordinarily huge memory and being in national security meetings where people bring up what seem to be totally unrelated things and he connects them. And he's been removed because Laura Loomer doesn't like him, the bigoted Laura Loomer. There is going to be a terrorist attack on this country sometime during this administration's. I was writing a piece on it when Timothy Snyder beat me to it. Timothy Snyder is the Yale historian who wrote On Tyranny and on Freedom, and who, along with two other Yale professors, is leaving and going to the University of Toronto because of the risk they're under from the Trump administration. I wrote a column about this at DC Report. I'm not leaving. I'm not going to Canada. I have every right to go to Canada because I meet all the qualifications, and one of my 8 children is a lawyer there who's a dual citizen and may become a judge soon. We have stopped our cyber warfare back and forth with the Russians. We have reduced all sorts of defenses that we undertake. And a great deal goes on in the national security world that we don't know about at the time that stops various things. When Bill Clinton was president, he got what he thought was credible information that there would be an effort on Millennial Day, January 1, 2000, to either blow up the Golden Gate Bridge or LA International Airport. And if you think about it, the Tom Bradley Terminal has all those jumbo jets that are full of fuel, loading people up. If you could blow up one of them, you probably could blow up the whole terminal and kill thousands of people who are getting on planes or waiting to get on planes. And Bill Clinton ordered the principal heads of the intelligence services to be in the Oval Office at 7:30 every morning, which meant that they had to get up at probably 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, be briefed, come to the White House, and essentially issued an order. We know now, we didn't know this contemporaneously, that there isn't a leaf to drop from a tree that you don't know about. Mm-hmm. And because they then hollered at everybody down below, because they don't want to get up at that hour in the morning, 2 agents in, or a border agent at the Blaine crossing between Canada and the US, that's where Highway 5 goes into Canada on the way up to Vancouver, pulled over 2 guys. And lo and behold, they had explosives in their back of their car, and their goal was to, if I recall correctly, blow up LAX's international terminal, and failing that, the Golden Gate Bridge, which I think would be pretty tough to blow up. That's clearly was designed to last, and originally built, I think it was 1,500 years. That's because we had a president in office with no military experience who understood the terrible threat of some terrorist attack, and who had been president when we had the first major attack in New York that failed, where they tried to blow up the World Trade Center from the basement because they didn't understand the engineering of the buildings. That's why they went to the airplanes. All of that's being shut down. There is this casualness that allows Pete Hegseth to tell in advance his wife, his personal lawyer, friends of his about the operational plans for the Houthis. And if the Saudis, our supposed friends, or the Iranians or the Houthis themselves knew about that channel signal messages in the commercial app, they certainly aren't going to tell anybody about it. And they're certainly not going to tell us. But to think that the Russians, the Iranians, the North Koreans, and others, including our friends in Israel, don't have the capacity to find out that Pete Hegseth is doing dangerous things like this is foolish. When and if we get an attack, and I think it's when, not if, and I expect it will be spectacular in the same way that 9/11 had no military significance whatsoever. It was a stunt. An evil, vile stunt that worked. It worked. It terrified Americans. We got the Patriot Act. We got lots of bad things that came out of it. If we have an attack, and as I said, I think it's when, not if, Donald Trump will then have the perfect excuse to impose martial law, suspend habeas corpus, which in the Constitution is a privilege, not a right, and take other actions that will enhance his power as dictator. And if I were Vladimir Putin, dictator Kim, maybe President Xi, I would absolutely want to help such an attack, because I want Donald Trump to become a dictator in full. It's in my interest to do that if I'm one of those dictators.
I was feeling.
So I'm sorry to leave you on a bad note. Like
it is a bad note, David Cay Johnston.
But I'm not alone in saying it. Timothy Snyder has said the same thing. He just got it out there before I did.
I feel like when you're talking about all the different protections that we have, you know, from being protected against Russian cyber attacks to milk tests to everything. And you're talking about all the ways in which our safeties are evaporating. And I'm thinking, why? Yeah. Why would they do this?
Because it's all about power, Kim. That's all it's about. Donald really, there's anything I know from 37 years of knowing Donald and spending hundreds of hours with him, it's that Donald believes that he is special, and he is the only one who knows how to run things, and all of the rest of us are idiots. Even his closest advisors, at the end of the day, they're idiots, and that motivates what he does. So anyway,
David Cay Johnston, thank you for swinging through. Yeah, thank you for coming on, and we'll see you again next week. I appreciate it.
See you next week.
David Cay Johnston, everybody. Wow, what an ominous message that we have to, have in our minds about what could happen in the future. It's pretty scary when you think about it. Tony, let's switch gears a little bit here because we have some cases that we haven't talked about that are pretty important. Why don't we do a little bit of law and disorder? What do you think? Yeah?
All right,
I like it.
Give me 1 second.
I like it too. Yeah, we have some criminal cases that we haven't talked about, so I think it's important. This is law and disorder.
In the criminal justice system, the people,
pimps, addicts, thieves, bums, winos, girls who can't keep an address, and men who don't care,
are represented by two separate yet equally important groups.
A cop, a flatfoot, a bull, a dick, John Law. You're the fuzz, the heat, you're poison, you're trouble, you're bad news.
These are their stories.
Well, Mrs. Menendez has been found guilty on all counts in a bribery trial. Mrs. Menendez, she married to Bob Menendez of the Gold Bars. A New York City jury convicted Nadine Menendez, who is the wife of this former New Jersey Senator Bob, who was convicted. Monday, she was convicted for her role in what is called a years-long bribery scheme along with her husband. So Nadine Menendez found guilty on all 15 counts against her, and she now faces sentencing in June. She was wearing a face mask, so the story I was reading said you couldn't tell her reaction to all of this. She's 58. Now both she and her husband, Bob, have been convicted of accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars in exchange for political favors to benefit the government of Egypt and to enrich themselves. Bob Menendez resigned his U.S. Senate seat after he was found guilty of accepting these bribes, including gold bars. Remember, they were found in coat pockets in the closet, and cash. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison and has to surrender to authorities in June. He is trying to appeal his conviction. 11 years for giving favors to another country. 11 years doesn't sound like enough. In exchange for political favors to benefit the government of Egypt, you basically sold out your country, sold out America, and you get 11 years. Now Nadine is going to be sentenced as well. The prosecutors say they were partners in crime, agreeing to accept all sorts of bribes, including the gold bars, the cash, a Mercedes-Benz convertible, a no-show job. Didn't even have to go, just got the paycheck, no problem. All in exchange for the senator's corrupt acts. The prosecutors say together, Nadine Menendez and Senator Bob Menendez placed their own interests and their greed ahead of the interests of the citizens that the senator was elected to serve. The New York City jury finding her guilty. Here we go with Scott Peterson again. He is back in the news because the LA Innocence Project says they've got new evidence that exonerates Scott Peterson. So they filed a petition last week claiming to have uncovered evidence that Peterson, who, as you may remember, was convicted of killing his pregnant wife, Lacey Peterson, they say he's not guilty of this. So they say the case against him was entirely circumstantial and that it shows issues with the police investigation and prosecutors withholding critical information during the high-profile trial. He was convicted of these murders in 2004, about 2 years after the death of his pregnant wife, Lacey. He has maintained that he is not guilty of this. Initially, Scott Peterson got the death penalty, but that was later changed to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The petition is requesting that the court vacate Scott Peterson's sentence. They say investigators and prosecutors mismanaged much of the investigation and then destroyed vital evidence. So we will see whether this case comes back to court. George Santos, also back in the news. He, according to the Department of Justice, remains unrepentant for his crimes. This ahead of his sentencing. The Justice Department arguing in a new filing that George Santos lacks remorse for his conduct. The sentencing for Mr. Santos, April 25th, so just days away. And they say he's acting with belligerence in his social media posts. He has this social media blitz that he is pulling off attacking the Justice Department. He posted, "No matter how hard the DOJ comes for me, they're mad because they will never break my spirit." He had another post criticizing the Department of Justice for indicting him, but not the capable pedophiles running around every power structure in the world, including the US government. The Justice Department responds, "It should go without saying that this signals defiance and victimhood while characterizing the federal government in a poor light is hardly an expression of genuine remorse." I wonder if George Santos realizes that by not being more repentant, by not issuing a full Tubin, "I'm sorry, I could have been a better person," by not accepting some responsibility here, the sentence might actually be more tough for him. It seems like he thinks he's a mini Trump, that he can get away with all this stuff and, bashing the people that prosecute him and the judge and whomever else. And I think he's going to have a rude awakening that indeed he is not a mini Trump, and the penalties will come for him. And that, my friends, is Law and Disorder.
Tune in again next time for more Law and Disorder on The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.
All right. I think, Tony, maybe we have time because I prepared this and I think we can do it. I have some stories that I think are of interest, especially with the summer travel season coming up. This is the stories from the sky.
We have clearance, Clarence.
Roger, Roger. What's our vector, Victor?
Enough is enough. I have had it with these monkey fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane. Everybody strap in.
No, the engine caught fire on a plane, a Delta Airlines plane at a Florida airport. This flight was headed to Atlanta, Georgia. It had left the gate when the flames began to rise, and people had to go down the slides to get off of this plane. The pictures of the plane on fire, I think, pretty dramatic. Yeah, look at that. Imagine you're taxiing down the runway and then boom, the smoke starts to fill the cabin. The plane catches fire. There's flames shooting from the plane, and then the slides come out. And I don't know if you get to grab your carry-on or your purse, or you just run for your life.
Probably not.
Bounce down the slide. I don't know. This happened, this fire on the tarmac at the Orlando International Airport. Leave it to me to be concerned about my stuff, right, in the middle of an emergency. The Delta flight was headed for Atlanta, Georgia, left its gate when one of the aircraft engines caught fire. According to the FAA, they have video of the aircraft showing flames and smoke coming out the back of the airplane's engine. They had staff down on the runway helping usher passengers off of the aircraft. Those aboard the plane, 282 passengers, 10 flight attendants, and 2 pilots had to be taken off the plane and into the airport's terminal building. Then the fire was contained and it was put out. In all of this drama, no injuries reported. Thank goodness. They say, Delta, that the flight crews followed procedures to evacuate the passenger cabin when the flames in the tailpipe of one of the aircraft's 2 engines were observed. Delta said the maintenance crew will be examining this plane to understand what touched off this fire. But yeah, everybody, 1 minute you're on the plane heading down the runway, the next you're bouncing down a slide trying to run for your life. So yeah. We also have a security issue. This one pretty interesting, brought out some fighter jets. This was an American Airlines plane from New York to New Delhi that had to land in Rome. And that is because of a security concern. They don't say exactly what. Whether something was found, whether a threat was called in is unclear. But this plane that was going from New York to New Delhi had to land. It was diverted due to a security concern, which the airline said was later found to be non-credible. The plane was inspected by law enforcement after it landed at Leonardo da Vinci International Airport and then was cleared to redepart. They didn't clarify the cause of the security concern, but here's what we know. You can see in the picture here, 2 fighter jets are filmed flying over the airport right before this unscheduled landing.
They had pictures from the fighter jet here.
Yeah, you had and the AP posted some pictures as well that show the fighter jets near this airplane. You had fire trucks visible on the landing strip on one side of the plane after it landed. So whatever this threat was, it was serious enough to bring out a fighter jet escort and to have preparations on the ground just in case. One of the passengers on board said the captain announced the plane had to turn around about 3 hours before it was supposed to land in New Delhi because of the change in security status. So apparently that was pretty stressful for people aboard. The captain then announced that fighter jets would be escorting their plane to Rome. And the passenger said, I felt a little bit of panic, like, okay, what's going on here? There's got to be something bigger going on here, according to the passenger that the Associated Press talked to. The passengers had no internet connection for much of the flight, and they really didn't know much of what was happening.
Oh,
they
no,
were all,
yeah, that would just be something.
I mean, that would be really disconcerting when they say the fighter jets are coming to escort us to Rome. All of the
fighter jet out your window, I'd be like, that's cool, but not cool at the same time.
Cool. Not cool. What's happening? Cool. The passengers were all loaded onto buses and taken to the terminal, where each and every passenger had their personal items go through additional security screenings that were apparently time-consuming, were slightly heightened. They checked the people, they checked all the bags. I mean, they looked at everything. For more than 2 hours after landing, apparently they were still waiting for their checked baggage because the officials were going through that as well. They say it was one of the longest flights they've ever taken. So, yeah, that was a pretty scary incident as well. But maybe not so scary. This new UK airline is offering long-haul flight champagne. They're serving a Laurent Perrier champagne, even in economy class. The champagne is flowing on this airline. They say they're trying to revive the golden age of flying. They're doing
to keep the complaints down by getting everyone drunk.
That's right. But haven't we discovered that maybe drinking aboard an airplane does not end well for anyone? I don't know. Mental note. We'll see how long this lasts.
Or someone runs down that aisle naked, right?
The airline is Global Airlines. The plane tickets include your checked baggage, which they say is a rarity for airlines these days, and also the free champagne. The champagne even for folks in economy class. The tickets are said to be a lot more expensive than other air carriers, but you have to include the fact that you're not paying for your baggage and that you get a glass of fancy champagne. The inaugural flights prices are significantly higher than many other airlines, but the founder and chief executive says that, listen, the price tag is worth it. People are sick and tired of the service they get on the current airlines, and we at Global will be better. People have had enough with how they're treated. Consistently, there are devaluations in loyalty platforms. He says there are people in management and shareholders that will over-reward themselves. And he says, I want to build a legacy. I would rather walk away with zero money and have something that people genuinely love. This is the 34-year-old leader of Global Airlines who says the quality of food and drinks on Global Airlines will be the best across all the transatlantic services. So there you go.
Spoken like a 34-year-old. I'd rather have no money and be do myself. Yeah, I say that now.
Let me have another glass of champagne.
Exactly.
Lastly, the list is out of the best airlines for airline passengers that are nervous, the nervous flyers among us. The best airlines, if you have an aversion to flight, or if you're feeling a little anxious when you step aboard the plane, the top 3 ranked air carriers for safety records, for cabin crew, for passenger comfort, they're all based in Asia, interestingly enough. And Singapore Airlines takes the top spot here. So if you have an occasion to fly Singapore and you are a bit of a nervous flyer, maybe this is the airline for you. They say it's easy to see why. The findings noted with perfect review and safety ratings and overall stress-free score, Singapore Airlines excels in passenger experience. They say they have a generous seat width, as well. So people like that, you have more room to relax on your long haul flights. And they do in-flight meditation. They have these meditation playlists that help you to bring down your anxiety level and relax. Oh, you're shaking your head, Tony, huh?
Meditation. Stop.
Meditation. You know what? If you're freaking out on the plane and you can put your mind at ease by a little meditation, go on.
Look at number 11 on the list. I think it's funny compared to the last flight. It says top factors for number 11, too much alcohol being served.
Right.
And the other airline's like, here's more.
Maybe here's more booze. That'll keep your anxiety levels low. Number 2 on the list is, I believe, Korean Airlines. Yeah, that's number 2 on the list. They have an impressive stress-free score. They have generous economy seat pitches, so you get a little more leg room as well, and maybe that gives people some less stress. And then the 3rd on the list is Cathay Pacific, which does not have a dedicated nervous flyer program like the top 2, but they also, Tony, have a relaxation playlist to help ease your anxiety. So maybe there's something to it. It's the only airline in the top 3 to have an official partnership with something called Headspace, which allows it to provide meditation support while in the sky. So you got to start meditating, Tony. It'll ease your anxiety and make the world better for you.
I don't know.
No, not doing it. No, that, my friends, is Stories from the Sky.
This has been Stories from the Sky. The captain has turned off the seatbelt sign, and you are now free to move about the cabin.
Ah, yes, free indeed. Free to head to the After Party Live, where we're going to be doing a little travel today on Travel Tuesday. Please come subscribe to that show. It is next after the Mark Thompson Show, and Tony will be posting a link in the chat. Huge thank you to Michael Hiltzik popping by to talk economy and Trump tariffs today. Huge thank you to David Cay Johnston coming by talking politics today as well. And a big thank you to Tony for all the videos and the pictures and being a major support today. I really appreciate you,
all
Tony.
Good.
Thank you. Yeah. Tomorrow on the Mark Thompson Show, we will have the wonderful presidential historian and political analyst John Rothman swinging by. We'll also talk with Belinda Weymouth, our eco-journalist, as we work diligently to save the planet. Can we do it? Find out tomorrow on the Mark Thompson Show.
For the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
For now, bye-bye. Thank you for all the ways you support this show.
Bye-bye.
Links in the chat.
Thank you. See you on the after party.